everyone, and welcome back to today's second Fossil Friday web chats. As a reminder, if you need auto captions or like to use them, you can use them in the video settings on Facebook. And I'm Brittany Stoneberg. I am the Outreach and Communications Coordinator for the Western Science Center. As always, with me is still helmeted Gabriel Santos, the Collections Manager for the Raymond and Alf Museum.
Mandalorian.
Yes. And joining us today is our friend Kiersten Formoso. Hi, Kiersten.
Hi, guys. So happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you.
I always enjoy Kiersten's talks, especially because they are full of memes. I'm so excited for this. So if you're not familiar with Kiersten and her work, she is a vertebrate paleontology PhD student at USC studying the evolution of the land-to-water transition in animals. She's from New Jersey, is obsessed with her undergraduate alma mater, Rutgers University, and sports rights and plays trombone in her spare time. So welcome, Kiersten.
Hello. Thanks for that introduction. I loved it.
I hope everybody's up for some really good memes today, because Kiersten is like the queen of paleo memes on Twitter.
Oh, that
she really is.
I like to consider myself a meme master for sure. Meme pro, I think I have in my bio.
As you should. And as always, everyone, if you have questions for Kiersten, throw them in the chat. And after her presentation, we'll go ahead and do a Q&A. So Kiersten, whenever you are ready, take it away.
Okay, cool. What time is it on? Is my phone right? Is it 2:57 or is it later than that?
2:57.
I don't want anyone to miss. Okay, I don't want anyone to miss the beginning. Do you want me to start a little earlier or at 3? Let people trickle in. What? It's up to you guys. I can go anytime.
Let's see.
We can go ahead and get started on there because it's going to be recorded anyway, so it should be fine.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So I'm gonna get started. Let me share my screen. Great. Okay. All right, here we go. So hi, everyone. As I was very nicely introduced by Brittany, my name is Kiersten Formoso, and I'm so excited to speak to you all today about my favorite animals and the subject of my research, aquatic tetrapods. And you can tell, as I said, I'm into the memes as I opened up my first slide with a meme right away. And I can, in fact, talk about most aquatic tetrapods in the next 20-ish minutes. So about myself, again, they introduced me, which is really nice, but yep, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Ecology and Evolution from Rutgers University, go RU. I'm currently a PhD student at USC, right here in sunny SoCal. I'm also a graduate student in residence at the Dinosaur Institute of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County. And so I'm a vertebrate paleobiologist and functional morphologist, and I'll kind of go through more deeply for what that actually means. And I study major evolutionary transitions, specifically the land to sea transition. And so what is a tetrapod? Firstly, we know what aquatic means, but as far as a tetrapod goes, tetra means 4, pod means foot. And so tetrapods are 4-footed backboned animals. The backbone is the key part of that. So backbone animals that evolved to have 4 limbs. And so you're a tetrapod. We have 4 limbs, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so tetrapods are going to be descendants essentially of those first walking fish. So an example pictured here is the really famous Tiktaalik. And then even a snake is a tetrapod. Even though snakes have no limbs, their ancestors had 4 legs, which we can actually see in fossils. So this is a prehistoric snake relative that actually had limbs. So snakes lost over time. And so to kind of show a very light introduction into cladistics or groupings of organisms based on similarities, let's say this group here, the big green box, is tetrapods. And then within that big box of tetrapods is lizards. And then within that box is going to be snakes, which are legless lizards, and they lost 4 legs. Snakes are still tetrapods because once you are in a group, you can't leave it. You can only make a more specialized group within that group. And so using that same logic, the animals I'm going to be talking to you about today are aquatic tetrapods, but a little bit more specific than that. So we have tetrapods here. Then we have a group called amniotes, and these are going to be animals that have an amniotic egg. An amniotic egg is essentially a protected egg. Mammals technically have an amniotic egg inside their body, and then amniotic eggs like hard-shelled eggs and like chickens and alligators and lizards and things like that. And within amniotes, we have Sauria, the group called Sauria, which is pretty much just reptiles. And then we also have mammals within amniotes as well. And within Sauria specifically, we have another deeper group called birds, which are technically reptiles. And so today I'm going to be speaking to you about aquatic amniotes, so aquatic reptiles and aquatic mammals. All right, so here are some silhouettes of generalized secondarily aquatic amniotes. Hopefully you can see a theme that they have fins and flippers and things of that nature. And they're called secondarily aquatic amniotes because they went back into the water. All of these animals have terrestrial or land ancestors. That's why they're secondary aquatic tetrapods, secondary aquatic amniotes. And so this is another one of my early memes kind of showing that, you know, the evolution of that fish into the early amphibian, and then an example of one aquatic tetrapod of a whale that evolved to go back into the water. And so there are secondarily aquatic adaptations that are associated with these animals. And so figure A here actually shows three fairly unrelated marine tetrapods. The top one is a whale, the middle one is a mosasaur, and the bottom one is an ichthyosaur. So these are all animals that belong to their own group, and they have very similar features, and they look very superficially similar, as does figure B of an ichthyosaur, which is a reptile on the top, and then a dolphin on the bottom. Further examples of that, this top picture in figure C here is actually a pinniped or a seal. And then the bottom picture there is a nothosaur, or an early relative of plesiosaurs. And figure D is a penguin and a great auk, both birds, but actually not that related. And so this cool figure I figured I'd put in because it's from a paper that just came out yesterday that shows the outline of an ichthyosaur with a really forward dorsal fin, so the back fin here, and then the shark on the bottom, which are not tetrapods, but a lot of animals evolved to look similar to what a shark would look like. And then enclosed flippers. These are all fairly distant related animals. We have a bird flipper all the way on the right, to an ichthyosaur flipper all the way on the left, mosasaurs and whales mixed in between, and sea lions too. And this feature is called a convergent evolution, in which you have two organisms, and these are distantly related organisms that converge and evolve similar or the same features that have similar purposes and functions. And so you can take an example of an animal that's actually in the same group related to deer and a lizard. Both evolved, have lineages that evolved aquatic features, and that includes dolphins and mosasaurs on the bottom. Though the early whale probably looked more like this than a deer, but it is related all the same. And so what did it first? Well, that would be marine reptiles, and I have a particular soft spot for marine reptiles, even though I'm interested in all aquatic amniotes. And so the first to do it, the first aquatic amniote ever is actually an animal called a mesosaur, and this lived in the Permian. So actually before the Mesozoic year, or the age of reptiles. And then, but most people associate ichthyosaurs with like the first ones to really do it because they're the ones who invaded the oceans after the Permian extinction. They had all this ecological space, and they really diversified and became very specialized. And plesiosaurs, pliosaurs included in this group, did it very shortly after ichthyosaurs. So they had a very long reign in the Mesozoic. And so more marine reptiles, we have turtles, like this archaeolon here, huge turtle. I love the fossils. Marine crocodiles, so crocodiles like we have today actually did some marine experimentation where they developed enclosed paddles and tail flukes. Mosasaurs, which are very well known as aquatic lizards, and also birds and that lived alongside these marine reptiles like Hesperornis that swam like a diving bird with its back feet. So these are all marine reptiles, and they did it in the Mesozoic, which is going to be here. So again, this is the age of the dinosaurs. And so they kind of replaced each other. They came in and out. Ichthyosaurs were particularly affected by climate change that kind of led to their decline. And then as soon as the ichthyosaurs started to go extinct, mosasaurs kind of, it's thought that they capitalized on the ecological space and opportunity. So mosasaurs slipped in right after ichthyosaurs did. And so then the asteroid hit. And so marine reptiles were no more. That asteroid that hit 66 million years ago and killed all the dinosaurs also killed pretty much all of these marine reptiles. And so now we're into the Cenozoic. So of course we have tons of marine amniotes that evolved in the Cenozoic as well. And it kind of, this meme is one of my favorites that I've made, kind of shows the oceans trying to clean house, after the asteroid hit, and large marine tetrapods, which were marine reptiles, were kind of knocked out. But it didn't take long for whales to come in and fill that void. So whales, here, this skeleton on the top shows one of these early whale ancestors that was clearly terrestrial. It has toes and long legs, and kind of an artist reconstruction on the top right there. And note that it's a hoofed animal. So whales are in the same group as I mentioned before: deer, pigs, sheep, cows, antelope, all artiodactyls. So hoofed ungulates. And of course, whales specialize to lose their limbs and their hooves as well. And so another meme, I think this might be my last one in my presentation, but like they said, I have a lot of memes and I'm happy to share them with you. But all right, and so shortly after whales evolved in the Cenozoic, sirenians, which includes dugongs and manatees, were right behind whales, maybe like a 5 million year separation between them, which is not a lot of time geologically speaking. And then pinnipeds. So pinnipeds did this probably about 25 million years ago, whereas whales and sirenians did it around 55 million years ago. And pinnipeds, as a diverse group, it includes eared seals, which are animals like sea lions and fur seals, and then true seals, which are going to be like harbor seals, leopard seals, other kind of classic seals that they're not very good on land, and they don't have the little ear flaps like eared seals do. And then the third group, which is going to be walruses. So that's pinnipeds. And then the last group of marine mammals to really do it, and fairly recently in geologic time, that is, are going to be otters and sea otters. So they evolved about 2 million years ago, which makes sense because they're not overly aquatically specialized the way pinnipeds and whales and manatees are, but they spend a lot of time in the water and are definitely considered marine mammals. And so it's not just mammals that went back into the water in the Cenozoic. Birds did it again and again and again. So there were many marine birds in the Mesozoic, but also in the Cenozoic as well. Some of the most well-known being penguins, also birds like this loon on the right here, which are excellent swimmers and flyers. They propel themselves with their big back feet. And then this type of bird here, which is a seabird that's native to Europe, and it swims with its front wings in addition to flying. It's really, really cool, and I love them. And other reptiles too. So sea snakes, marine iguanas, and sea turtles, of course, evolved in our modern kind of Cenozoic era as well. So lots of aquatic tetrapods kind of doing the same experimentation over and over again with the water. And so that's just a light summary on what marine tetrapods there are and when they existed. So what is my research actually on? Well, I'm interested in the functional changes that it takes an animal to go from land to sea. And so here we have a basic front view of a general kind of land tetrapod. So we have an upright postured mammal on the left here, and then a sprawling postured animal on the right there, something like a lizard. And on the left, it includes both mammals, but also technically birds have an upright posture with their limbs directly underneath their body, not really sprawling. So I'm interested in asking if the posture on the left versus the posture on the right may facilitate evolution to an aquatic environment, or potentially constrain evolution to an aquatic environment. Constraint in the sense that they can still evolve to an aquatic environment, but maybe they have to overcome certain functional hurdles in evolving to be an aquatic amniote. And so I don't really have results to show you yet. I'm still in the process of this as my PhD project, but that is my general question, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it in the context of the way these organisms swim when they have this posture. So on the left is a dog, that's an upright animal doing this paddle, classic doggy paddle. And it's not just dogs that swim this way, even though it's called a doggy paddle. Deer are going to swim this way. Elephants are going to swim this way. Other four-legged mammals are going to swim this way. And then you have the sprawling on the right. Now, of course, this is a marine iguana. These are pretty marine animals, but they're still very terrestrial. They still have that sprawling land terrestrial posture, and they're still good at walking on land. But these sprawling animals, when you put them in the water, they tend to fold their limbs back and move their body, undulate it from side to side to kind of swim forward. And so there are key differences in how both of these animals swim when they're on land, yet both postures still evolve into a plethora of aquatic amniotes, all with very similar features and convergent evolution. So that is the most interesting question to me, that such differences on land led to a lot of this, again, convergence in the aquatic descendants of these animals. And so I'm looking at this from the perspective of function on land, but also I'm interested in what the swimming styles are. So what type of swimming styles did each of these postures lead to, and what were the functional changes in doing that? So there's really two types of swimming that you can employ. One is body and tail fin propulsion. So this is when you generate a wave in your body, and that wave motion will go down the body and propel you forward. There are different levels of flexibility and how they kind of influence that forward motion. You can be very flexible to fairly stiff, where some of your motion is generated from the end of your body. And typically that's how things evolve when they're doing body caudal fin propulsion. They tend to go from more flexible to stiffer as they become more specialized for marine life. Then you also have swimming with limbs, so flippers and paddles. You're getting lift-based propulsion, essentially flying underwater with your paddles. Like sea turtles do this, and penguins do it. Pinnipeds to some degree, mainly sea lions, and then animals like plesiosaurs definitely swam with their limbs. And so how did certain groups of aquatic tetrapods or aquatic amniotes swim? I'm going to go through just a couple of them to give you a kind of insight. So the first one is going to be a plesiosaur, because I have big on the top, not a dinosaur, because a lot of people think that these are. Terrestrial relatives might be turtles, maybe, doesn't really matter, they're weird. And they probably swam something like this, where if you have the plesiosaur on the top and you have its front limbs with the red dye and its back limbs with there we go, and its back limbs with the blue dye, it kind of swims in like this wave-like fashion that propel them through the water in a very synchronized manner. Note that the blue dye in the back isn't mixing, or the blue paddle isn't mixing with the dye swirls of the red paddle. So it's not like the back limbs would be causing drag on the front limbs. So that's just an idea. It's really hard to know really how plesiosaurs swim, because we have no modern analogs that swim like they did or have the same morphology. So we can make solid scientific inferences. And so other marine tetrapods are ichthyosaurs, very well known, also not a dinosaur. And so they swam with caudal fin propulsion. Some were very flexible. Some had long, flexible bodies, like mosasaurs, very serpent-like. Others were short and stout, like dolphins. And so they probably had a range of swimming styles ranging based on their flexibility. So I have a swordfish here as an example of, perhaps an ichthyosaur swam similar to this, as they did have the tail fins that fish have. Mosasaurs, so we know mosasaurs for sure, though not as preserved in as many specimens as ichthyosaurs. We know mosasaurs did have a tail fin, so this cool figure on the bottom right shows that impression of the tail fin, and then the figure on the bottom left shows their enclosed paddles. So mosasaurs definitely swam with a caudal fin and body propulsion primarily. This is actually some of my other graduate research, where I'm doing research on how mosasaurs swam specifically, and I have some projects in the works, and so definitely stay tuned for that. But we can kind of estimate that they probably had a flexibly stiff body, and like I said, stay tuned for that. But they probably swam like sharks, like very, very aligned closely with sharks for various reasons. A lot of that research has already been done as well. And then you have whales. So this here is a baleen whale. It's a humpback whale, very famous. So they also swim with caudal and body fin propulsion. Caudal fin and body propulsion, but in the vertical plane. So the animals we've seen so far that swim with their tail fin and body are swimming sideways with the tail going left-right, like a fish or a shark, whereas whales go up-down. And then here's a toothed whale. So this is an orca, of course, and an orca is actually the largest dolphin in the world. And so orcas also swim in that same vertical plane. Toothed whales tend to be just a little shorter in body and a little bit stiffer as well, but still pretty similar. And then you have eared seals. So I said before, these are going to be sea lions and fur seals. Pinnipeds are in the group Carnivora, and specifically they're on the dog-bear side of Carnivora, so more closely related to dogs and bears than, say, other carnivores like cats. And they swim with pectoral oscillation, where they're actually flapping and flying and getting lift-based propulsion from their front forelimbs. And they're really cool. I love how sea lions swim. They can get amazing maneuverability, and they can actually turn on a dime so quickly that they can experience nearly 6 Gs of force when they turn around fast. And then you have true seals, which actually swim with a kind of pelvic oscillation using their flippers. So kind of hind limb driven. It's interesting to look at here. It actually looks like a kind of side to side motion, like a reptile. So they kind of turn their hind limbs into a propeller, essentially, and that's how they move themselves forward. Not much forelimb action except for turning and maneuvering and things like that. And then you have manatees, which are just big, goofy animals, but they do swim legit with their tail, their big flappy tail. You can kind of see here, caudal oscillation as well. And their terrestrial relatives are elephants, actually. And then you have this dugong here. And note that a dugong has a more whale-like tail with like an actual fluke, so kind of a two-prong, but it still swims with a caudal oscillation like a manatee. But dugongs are actually more marine and open ocean than manatees. Manatees are a little more chill and slow, so they're not as efficient swimmers as dugongs. And then you have sea turtles, which are going to be flapping their flippers, also in a lift-based propulsion. So I guess similar to penguins and pinnipeds, where they're using primarily their forelimbs to move themselves through the water. And then sea snakes. So sea snakes, of course, like I said before, they're still tetrapods, though they don't have their legs anymore. Sea snakes swim in what's called angioform locomotion, where they have a very flexible eel-like motion in their body, with the wave starting at their head, ending at the tail, and they move forward through the water column. And note they have like a flat oar-like tail as well. Fun fact about sea snakes is that all the animals today, they're actually the most aquatic living marine reptile. So, we don't have any more mosasaurs or plesiosaurs today. So the most marine reptile on Earth is a sea snake. Many species don't even come out of the water, not even to lay eggs. And then finally, yes, an actual dinosaur. So penguins, one example of birds, literally swim with subaqueous flight. They turn their flying forelimbs, birds, many of these birds had ancestrally, into swimming flyers, essentially. And it's just really, really cool how amazing swimmers penguins are. And so that's really all I have as far as the background. So what marine tetrapods there are, what my research is, and how they swim. So some of the key takeaways I want you to have are that secondarily aquatic tetrapods are just the best. I love these animals, and I'm so privileged and grateful to be able to study, animals that I've loved as a kid since I was like a little kid. And so only a few terrestrial lineages evolved to go back in the water. I went through a good chunk just now, and I would say I got through most of the major ones. I did miss a few here and there, but when you compare it to the broad diversity of animals that exist on land, or rather of tetrapods that exist on land, you realize that not as many groups went into the water. And so there are different terrestrial postures, namely the two that led to aquatic tetrapods, so kind of an upright posture with your limbs underneath your body that mammals and birds have, and then the sprawling posture with your limbs kind of splayed out to the side. That's mostly going to be seen in lizards and other sprawling reptiles. And evolution can be quite repetitive. So as we saw, there are various experiments that all kind of aligned up in how these animals looked, everything from ichthyosaurs to mosasaurs to whales, all were incredibly similar. And then similar features of like between pinnipeds and plesiosaurs and sea turtles and penguins and things like that. And again, so swimming in aquatic tetrapods is diverse, but not incredibly, it's not like they all have a huge range of swimming styles, but each lineage certainly puts its own kind of spin on it based on their ancestry. And all of these swimming styles, though, are still going to be pretty similar due to convergent aquatic features. Basically, there's only so many ways you can propel yourself in water. You need to either do lift-based propulsion or drag-based propulsion, rather a combination of both, which is what most animals have. And I hope with that, you realize that marine tetrapods are way cooler than dinosaurs. As a paleobiologist, everyone's like, oh, you study dinosaurs. I was like, no, my animals are much, much cooler than dinosaurs, but I'm clearly biased, but hopefully you agree after this presentation. So that's it. That's all I got. Thank you. Wait for, there we go. Hey, Gabe.
That was great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I did it.
And I
did it in 20
especially,
minutes.
and considering that I have a tattoo of an ichthyosaur, I'm with you. Marine reptiles being way cooler than dinosaurs.
Awesome. Yes, they are. And I love that so much.
Also, I will say one thing that I appreciate about you, Kiersten, is also your incredible love for the 1998 Godzilla movie.
I do, yes. For those who
Right?
don't know,
Like,
that movie is the movie that got me into paleontology, but we won't talk about that today.
We could.
No, I'm just saying you are valid.
You get it. Thank you.
Yes, that movie is ridiculous, and I kind of love it.
I do.
So we have lots of great questions. So let me start and get into that. The first question is from Grant.
Cool. Do you want me to close my presentation, or does it look like
it's already closed? Don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah, it's already closed.
Perfect.
We're good.
Good.
All right. So this question comes from Grant, who asks, did turtles go back to the sea, or did the marine ones survive the KPG extinction?
Oh, that's a great question. So what's really interesting about turtles is that we actually think that the turtles the sea turtles that we have today are actually descended from the terrestrial turtles, or the freshwater turtles that survived the KPG extinction. So basically that asteroid didn't kill all turtles, but it seems to have definitely killed the Mesozoic sea turtles, and the turtles that survived were going to be small turtles that lived on land and freshwater environments, and those turtles are the ones that evolved to go back into the water in the Cenozoic.
Interesting.
And then this is a question coming from Alton, who's asking, polar bears are behaviorally semi-aquatic, but have no obvious skeletal adaptations for this. What are the implications of this for interpretation of extinct animals, especially with respect to giant sloths, he says?
Wow, yeah, that is a really good question. And it's funny, for those watching, I'm sure I offended some people when I didn't go into marine sloths. It was not a purpose. But yeah, so polar bears are considered marine mammals as far as their life ecology goes, but you're right, they don't have overt aquatic features. They have some little ones here and there. They have kind of a torpedo-shaped face, a longer neck. I think there might be some histology, so bone density of polar bears that might be a little more. I'm not sure. I can double check on that. But yeah, that's a great question, in the sense that we may have fossils that we found that we think is a land animal, but it might have been a marginal animal where it's kind of bouncing in between ecologies. And kind of the only way we can really determine that is going to be histology is a big one. A lot of animals, when they evolve to go into aquatic environments, their bones get denser because you want to be submerged, especially air-breathing animals. They have all that lung lifting them up. You need something to weigh you down. So sometimes the histology will reveal that animals are more aquatic than we thought when you take thin sections of the limb bones or the ribs. And then just where the fossils are found, perhaps if you keep finding these animals in deep marine sediments, you can stop guessing that maybe they're just washed out and that they might actually live in those environments. So it's a good question, and one that people who study marine tetrapods definitely ask, and there's no clear kind of ideas on that yet. So.
On that, Kiersten, is there like a threshold that says what makes a marine mammal or a marine tetrapod, aquatic tetrapod, versus a non or amphibious type tetrapod? Because desmostilians, for me, as we study we consider them marine mammals, but they don't have very many of what you might say are marine or aquatic looking adaptations, even though they have some. So is there like a threshold that other people use?
So I don't want to spoil anything, but a good chunk of my research currently is actually trying to determine these thresholds, and with my own methodology. Others have, for sure, with ecology and just, function in general. So I'm also trying to throw my own hat in the ring for kind of determining, you know, a solid tier system is what I'm working on, like a tiering of degrees of aquatic adaptation and binning certain animals within those tiers. So the answer is yes and no.
As it is so many times in paleontology, I think.
Yeah, lots of methods, lots of expertise, and it's great. You know, everyone's coming at it from a different angle, and so you know, my angle is going to be the purely functional, not purely, but very functionally driven angle.
Cool.
So yeah.
Cool. All right. This question is from Elias. Do we know anything about Mesozoic marine reptile physiology?
Oh, okay. So that's a really good question. And yes, a little bit. So physiology, for those who may not be sure, is going to refer to things like warm-bloodedness, cold-bloodedness. So things like that. And so we can definitely infer that a lot of these large marine reptiles were probably at least slightly endothermic, at least just based on their size. When you're that big, you're simply unable to expel heat the way smaller animals can. So they're naturally going to have heat maintained in their bodies, and that might actually contribute to energetics and better muscle movement, things of that nature. Even animals like tuna, so tuna are fish. Fish are typically considered cold-blooded, but tuna, if you ever have tuna for food, you see they have a very red, meaty part that runs in the middle around their spine. That's actually kind of an endothermic tissue that tuna have that kind of helps with their aquatic physiology and their energy and their metabolism. So based on size, we can infer that a lot of these marine reptiles were probably slightly warm-blooded. But then others certainly weren't. I would say things like marine crocodiles today, they were smaller and you know, they probably have physiology that matched up very closely with our kind of modern crocodilians, which need to kind of bask in the sun a little bit before they kind of have the energy to go. So we know some things, and other things is left up to, you know, inferences. Yeah. Oh, and this is really cool. A fossil of ichthyosaurs with blubber. An ichthyosaur with blubber was recently discovered and described. And if something has blubber, that means it's conserving heat. Like mammals have blubber as a way to keep the heat in their body. So if ichthyosaurs had blubber, then there's a good chance that ichthyosaurs had heat to conserve, had heat to keep in. So yeah, hope that was a good answer to your question.
That's
cool.
fascinating. I had I had never seen that paper.
Yeah. It's a really cool paper.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. This question is from Anne, who's asking, any ideas on why tetrapods are able to fill these apex predator marine niches instead of fishes?
Oh, that's such a good question. I've gotten asked that before. I honestly don't know, and it's not just tetrapods. Like we can't forget about sharks. Sharks have almost always dominated the oceans. They've done it for so long, and they're so specialized that sharks are exactly right where they need and essentially where they want to be. But there are huge, scary fish that have evolved all throughout, you know, evolutionary history. A lot of people give a lot of focus to the tetrapods because they're cool and they're charismatic, but you had giant fish in the Mesozoic or the late Cretaceous called Xiphactinus that was like 20 plus feet long, huge, gnarly, scary teeth. I would not want to mess with this fish at all. This fish probably ate small mosasaurs and small plesiosaurs, you know, in addition to being eaten itself. It was a balancing act. And then you have Megalodon, of course. You know, Megalodon wasn't even the only giant shark. It's just the most well-known. So tons of giant sharks did evolve in kind of the wake of the KPG extinction in the Cenozoic, and there were also giant sharks, large sharks that lived in the Mesozoic as well. So I don't think fish and sharks didn't do it. It's just that we may not give them the same level of attention because they've always been in the water. So they simply had to be in the water and evolve into a new aquatic niche, whereas tetrapods are extra interesting because they went from land to the water to a dominant ecological role in many instances. So don't sleep on fish, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, if anybody is interested too, we've got 2 great talks on apex predator fishes. Randy Flores did a talk way when we started this on Megalodon, and Amber Michaels did a great presentation on fish food webs, where she actually does talk about Xiphactinus and other large predatory fish.
So cool. Yeah, they're like, I love fish. I have nothing against fish, even though my animals definitely hate fish.
Alrighty. Looks like that might be all of our questions. Those were really good questions. Those were really
good questions.
Yeah, those are really good
Kirsten,
questions.
I have a question.
Good job, people. Yeah, go
So
for it,
since you mentioned it, can you please explain how the Godzilla movie inspired you to be a paleontologist?
Yes.
And did that movie, because for those who have seen it, Godzilla, I guess, is a marine reptile because of the way that they portrayed her in the movie. Is that what got you into studying these kinds of creatures?
You know, I wish I could say it had to do with the marineness, but no, actually, I would say Godzilla was like my gateway into a theropod design. Like, I was just very enthralled with that theropod look, that horizontal, two-legged, meat-eating dinosaur look. Even though technically Godzilla 1998 is a lizard, like Godzilla 1998 is technically a giant mutated marine iguana. So it checks out. It's totally on brand that I love it, but I only love it for its marine iguana-ness in hindsight. But when I first loved it, it was because it looked like a big dinosaur. I was like, oh, that's a cool-looking creature. I'm into this. What other things look like that? Oh, T-Rex and Allosaurus and raptors. And then getting into theropods got me into paleontology in general. And then I, fell more in love with the fantastical creatures of the fossil record, dinosaurs and marine reptiles. And then more interested in biology and, associated with that evolution. And so that's really how I got into it. But yeah, Godzilla 98 was definitely, and that was like a scary movie when I was like, don't think I was like sitting there like, oh, cool. Like I remember watching it with my family. It was like a for-your consideration copy. I have no idea how we got it. We were watching it. And I was so scared when like the baby Godzilla started to come out. I remember that, but it stuck with me positively, through the years. So I even have it on 4K Blu-ray. So.
See, what I got out of that last sentence is that at some point, because I was very young, I was also very young when this came out. At some point, Godzilla 98 was up for an Oscar, apparently, considering it was a for-your consideration copy.
I think it was just a general critics.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I was like, I do not remember that.
I don't know. I thought it was a fun movie.
That was
I did too,
movie.
But
people hate that movie way too hard. If people always say that if that movie was never called Godzilla, people wouldn't hate it as much as they do. So it had Godzilla's shadow to fill. But whatever. I don't shamefully or unshamefully love that movie.
Did you know that Godzilla appeared in another Japanese Godzilla movie? I can't remember which one it was, but I remember watching it. And
it was
that
Final
one.
Wars. It was Godzilla Final Wars. And it was so offensive. They just used it to like
not know that.
Yes, they smacked that Godzilla into the Sydney Opera House when it was defeated by the true Godzilla. It's dumb. How dare they disrespect my Zilla like that?
Yep.
Okay, so we do have one extra question that's come up. This is from William asking, has there been a thorough or partial comparison of the endocasts between extinct marine tetrapods to see similarities between the taxa?
Oh, that's a good question. So for those watching at home, an endocast is essentially a scan of the brain space. And so when you take a scan of that brain space, you can infer where the brain was and the brain's reaches and what regions of the brain were big. So large olfactory or smell region, large eyesight region, etc. And so an endocast and marine tetrapod comparison, don't know that has been done. I'm sure there have been individual endocasts done of well-preserved marine tetrapods. The thing is, since a lot of these animals were marine, they have excellent preservation because they die, they go down in the water, they get covered by sediment after they're eaten by bottom feeders, and then we have the beautiful fossils millions of years later. Though a lot are compressed and flat, like in slabs, where there's beautiful preservation and presentation, but they're not 3D enough to take a solid endocast. So I don't know, is my honest answer to that question, but I'm interested for sure.
Awesome. All righty. Well, it looks like that was all the questions we had. Did you have any other questions,
I
Gabe?
have tons of questions if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I don't mind.
Like for me, like studying when I was still really studying paleontology, I'm trying to understand how animals adapted is adapted to life in water is a great question because there's so many things you can think about. But there are some things we can't probably answer. Is more of like sometimes the why. Kiersten, is like when you're
Yeah.
studying, kind of looking at like mosasaurs or ichthyosaurs, do you kind of create your own ideas as to these whys based on the evidence you have, and do you have like your own preferred kind of story as to why animals were going back into the water in some of these different groups of aquatic tetrapods?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and also one of the subjects of my research, kind of. So my earliest venture into paleontology research, and I was taught a really valuable paleontology or evolution skill, which is it's really hard to answer whys, and it's much easier to answer hows. So, how did these animals evolve? Well, they did it with these steps. First, they changed this feature and they did that. So those are the hows. The whys are hard questions. I understand why, paleontologists and evolutionary biologists are about answering those. I would say that some of the why is a big driver for my research in the sense that I'm asking these questions about posture because I'm curious why some animals with these postures did it and some didn't. So I'm curious to why the ancestors of mosasaurs were the ones that did it versus the ancestors of other sprawling lizards. Maybe lizards more closely related to bearded dragons. They were also sprawling, but instead it was the mosasaur snake kind of side of lizards that did this. So I'm interested in that why. Why this sprawling animal? And the same thing for the upright posture. Why this lineage of upright artiodactyls? Why artiodactyls at all? Why haven't we gotten other kinds of groups of upright mammals? So I'm interested in kind of like I touched on before, the functional limitations that some of these postures might have, and some animals with these postures might have. So it's not just, upright is a very broad thing, but there might be little minute differences in how these things are, on land that might impact these evolutionary transitions. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to the bottom of in my PhD. This is a really broad project though. What I'm talking about doing is honestly more of a lifetime lab kind of deal, we'll only touch on some of this in the next 3 years. But yeah, so I am interested in those whys because it's really, really interesting to me why some things did it and why some things didn't. And I don't think it's just about ecological space. A lot of people say that, you're like, the ecological space is open. That's why ichthyosaurs did it. Okay, so the ecological space is open, but why didn't something else fill it? Why was it ichthyosaurs and et cetera? So that's, that is a great question. And it's one of my driving forces.
I mean, it's exciting to like ask those. Go ahead, Brittany.
Oh no, we have more questions that have come up as a result of this discussion. So this question is from Andrew McDonald, curator at the Western Science Center, asking, why are whales and sirenians the only marine tetrapods to evolve vertical swimming motions?
Oh, that's a great question. So scientists think it has to do with the way the vertebral column is set up in mammals. Mammals have kind of this very rigid torso and like that upright body posture. It's more and more facilitates kind of upright movement as soon as you start to kind of loosen up and get that flexibility. And I am trying to look into more of the details of that for my research. So a lot of my specimens are going to be essentially vertebrae and limbs and pelvic and pectoral girdles of these animals. But so yeah, it's the way the mammal body is designed, not designed, but the way the mammal body is that enables mammals to facilitates more of an upright motion. But the reason why I'm cautious and kind of tiptoeing around it is because it's not only that way. There are some weird animals called otter shrews, which are in the tenrec kind of family, that actually swim with a sideways oscillation. And then that video that I showed, of the seal swimming with the pelvic oscillation, it was using its hind but there is definitely some horizontal movement in that, with motion coming from the side to side motion coming from the lumbar spine. So it's not cut and dry. Mammals will swim with an up down, even though that's what a lot of people think. So it really just depends on the lineage. But yeah, the big ones definitely have that up down.
That reminded me of a question. What do we have? What kind of swimming motion do humans do?
So we're weird because we swim upright, and technically, this is going to blow your minds. The amount of time that humans spend in the water compared to other animals actually suggests that we're semi-aquatic tetrapods. To some degree, spend way more. We spend so much recreational time in the water, and then like the way swim teams operate, like it's really quite amazing, actually. But I'll get into that. That's for anthropologists. So. We swim with our limbs, yeah. So but then humans, when they do that, when they first get in the water, they do that kind of mermaid thing. So we kind of have that functional ability as well. And because our limbs are backwards, we're a little bit more freed from that angle swimming, where these are the legs, this is the torso. So I think by humans having our legs essentially in this plane, we are allowed a little bit more of that flexibility movement, where a dog can't do that. You wouldn't see a dog try to do that like mermaid thing. So maybe humans are the key to all of this. Maybe studying how we maybe.
What do you think of?
But yeah, if I had to categorize humans, I'd call us limb-based swimmers.
What do you think about mermaid physiology? Does it make sense to you? Like, I know they're fake, but does that make sense?
Yeah, so like, I don't know if you guys saw that stupid Animal Planet thing years ago that tried to make it seem like mermaids were real.
Oh yeah, I
not do that.
conveniently forgot that.
I know a lot of people who really believe
that
was real. Regardless, it's not real. Yeah, but let's call it a fantasy. Yeah. Let's say primates did evolve to go into the water. I would say, yeah, primates would probably follow a similar pathway that other marine mammals did, with an upright. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on mermaids, but again, a little bit. I don't want to give people I don't want to give the mermaid enthusiasts too much
That's
power.
fair.
Yeah, completely fair. Awesome. Well, that looks like all the questions that we had from the chat. Thank you, everyone. Those were really good, great questions. And thank you, Kiersten, for presenting.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy I was finally able to do this.
So excited to have you on the show. And for everybody, if you're not following Kiersten on Twitter yet, make sure you do so immediately for all the choice paleo memes, and it's great. And of course, the science.
Yes.
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. My meme.
Get a twofer.
I actually posted a marine tetrapod meme just yesterday. It was a big hit. Follow me. So at for morphology, or even just search my name in Twitter. I'll be there. It's
Follow Kiersten for the choicest paleo memes.
Indeed.
So thank you everybody for joining us this week. We will be on a break next week, and we will resume our Fossil Friday web chats on the 17th. And as always, if you'd like to support our museums in any way, there will be information on how to do that after this video ends. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.